Over 50 million Americans are diagnosed with some type of disabling condition, such as bipolar disorder, mental retardation, and depression. However, society wasn't always welcoming to individuals with diagnosis, especially mental retardation. From the beginning of time, society has looked at individuals diagnosed mentally retarded as abominations to the human race, and often resorted to the use of euthanasia and labeled them as being idiots. It wasn't until the 1840s that society really accepted that they were still human beings. Dr. Edward Jarvis became fascinated with those diagnosed as idiots and began studying their conditions. This is when trials were conducted to see how they fared in insane asylums. Shortly after the asylums, they feared they would become more of a nursing institution to care for these people instead of being resources for those diagnosed insane. Society began trials in the attempts to teach mentally retarded children at an asylum for the dumb and deaf in Connecticut in 1817. These trials ranged from a few months to a few years, but mentally retarded children weren't admitted to full-time students until 1839. It was conducted that mentally retarded children should be segregated from other students, whether they are disabled or not, because they had a negative effect on the other students. The first established school for the mentally retarded was finalized in 1846. This was also around the same time that asylums were created specifically for the mentally challenged. In 1846, Senator Frederick Backus attempted to unite those with mentally retarded into the public in 1847 by trying to pass a bill for a public school for those with mental disease. The bill was denied after being passed through the Senate. After it being denied, doctors grouped together to form committees to increase their studies. It was conducted that God, the Creator, created these children as a form of punishment to their parents' wrongdoings, and it wasn't just to treat his creations unfairly for his parents' mistakes. This is when the institutions really came into the picture. The community felt that children needed to be removed from their parents' behavior that caused the disabilities and learn in an institutional setting how to be able to be independent. After a few years, the public grew in an outrage of all the money that was being wasted on these children when it could be spent on someone more gifted. The committee's responses to this was to set up a measurement system to determine how much knowledge the mentally retarded children were retaining. But it wasn't until the 1960s that the American citizens became outraged at the environments that these individuals were living in. Right now I work at a state facility, formerly known as an institution, and in some of the old buildings you can still see the old equipment on display to show what the environmental settings were like before the 1960s. Some of the original buildings still have the anchors in the wall they used to chain the clients up if they had behavioral issues. The staff that have been there for over 20 years still to this day discuss how when they first started, there would be 25 clients in a room that would be 20 foot by 40 foot, and the only privacy they had was a curtain between them and their next bedmate. And then, up until 6 years ago, my facility used timeout rooms. These timeout rooms were lined with tabs so that if a client became hazardous to themselves or another individual while they were expressing their behaviors, they could be placed in this room until they calmed down. Society has evolved over time to learn that those with mental retardation are not the threat that they believed from the beginning. In the 1960s and 70s, this is the time when change really started for individuals diagnosed with mental retardation. President Kennedy passed the Mental Retardation Facilities and Community Mental Health Centers Construction Act in 1963. This established the University of Affiliated Facilities, which provided care to people with disabilities. In the 1960s, Medicaid and Medicare was creating, providing resources for those individuals and their families to seek proper medical treatment. President Johnson created a Presidential Committee on Mental Retardation in 1965. The Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964. President Nixon set a goal of moving one-third of the nation's 200,000 institutionalized individuals with mental retardation into supportive community living. He issued presidential directives that required the Attorney General to enforce the rights of the mentally retarded and create ways to improve their housing. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 prohibits discrimination against handicapped individuals in any federal-funded program. Finally, the Americans with Disability Act was passed in July 26 of 1990. This was to preserve an individual's rights who was diagnosed with a mental disability. Many efforts have been made to improve the lives of people diagnosed with mental retardation. To ensure that they live and learn the ways of society, they are given the same rights as any other person and live a fully functional life. The problem is so much time has been spent focusing on how to make these individuals' lives more human and sophisticated in order to learn how to adapt to the changing society that no one has ever thought how society could also adapt to meet their needs. In the facility I work at, we provide active treatment. That means that any activity or care we are providing with the client, we must encourage their participation. We encourage their participation by providing them options to make their own choices or using hand over hand to show them how to complete a task. This is a great learning method to teach them how to care for themselves. The problem we are having is we are teaching them to care for themselves, but our clients remain segregated from the rest of the community. The facility is located on the outskirts of town, and we have to drive through a tunnel to get to the facility grounds. The facility arranges for our clients to go off campus in order to participate in activities in the community. But when they go out, they are still treated like outcasts. I have taken clients out into the community, and people will step as far away as possible to avoid contact. I have also heard community members comment, "I can't believe they even let those people out. I miss the days when they used to drown all the Mongoloids. I can't believe these people are wasting all of our tax money." I think that overall the main problem with society is that the majority still practice the beliefs prior to 1960. These beliefs have been passed down through the generations, and it is up to society to evolve with the times and be more accepting of all of its members. Sadly, I don't see this happening anytime soon. I think that it will take time for these changes to occur, as these beliefs will have to die out with the elder generations, and it is up to the younger generation to form and mold a new society.